Thank you, everyone. It's been a really interesting, insightful day today. I've been fascinated by the stories. I'm sure you have too. And to take our conversation about food on, we thought we'd introduce the future of cooking and ask 3 of the top chefs in London at the moment to talk to us about what they're doing at the moment and what they see the future of food as being. I'm sure they don't need introductions, but for a quick reminder, I'll tell you who they are. First, we've got Tom Brown in the middle. There's not much that Tom Brown hasn't achieved this year. He's been championing his great new restaurant, Cornerstone, and is winning awards and will continue to win awards, I'm sure. He's cooked at the banquet, the Great British Menu, and doing some of the most exciting fish cookery, I think, in the UK at the moment, and vegetables as well. We'll get onto that. Secondly, we've got Neil Rankin, who's a social media star. Neil and I actually went to school together, so it's the only reason I managed to convince him to do this.
Bravery.
Bravery, exactly, yeah. Some of the stories of our...
Didn't pay me back then either.
No, exactly. He needs no introduction. One of the pioneers of live fire cooking in the capital. He's the owner and chef of of 3 of London's hottest restaurants, Temper Soho, City Temper, and his newest venture, Temper Covent Garden, which serves along with other delights some amazing Detroit pizza. And I would urge you all to get along. And then finally, we have Theo Randall, a Michelin-starred chef and Italian cooking legend. I wrote this very late at night. And he's formerly head chef and partner of the River Cafe and alumnus of Chez Panisse in San Francisco. And more recently, he's in charge of restaurant Theo Randall in the Intercontinental in London, and an ever-increasing global restaurant empire with outposts in Hong Kong and Bangkok. So welcome to our chefs. Theo, we've talked... Theo, we've talked an awful lot about vegetables and veganism, and vegetables becoming the centre of the plate in a lot of restaurant dishes. And you're a great champion of vegetables on your menu. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you have on the menu you enjoy cooking at the moment?
Yeah, hi everybody. I love cooking vegetables and always have done. I mean, I think about the early days of the River Cafe when we used to spend, so much time trying to source ingredients. And I think it's so much easier now to get fantastic quality ingredients in vegetables. And I think the vegetables are sort of taking over from the proteins. So we're always trying to do, not even intentionally, doing cooking dishes that may be vegan and actually thinking, my God, that's a vegan dish. I can put it on the menu and call it vegan. But I think it's all about the quality of the produce and keeping it. I'm very much a believer of less is more. And I think if you've got really fabulous ingredients, and particularly vegetables like beetroots or carrots or some of these amazing greens you can create really fabulous food. Mm-hmm. And, it's about keeping it simple, but actually making sure you get the utmost out of the flavour of the dishes, the flavour of the vegetables. And we've got a wood oven, so that really helps with things. I mean, cooking things really slowly increases flavour. So it's not just about flavour, it's also about texture. So it's trying to get the right texture and flavour combination together.
You're talking about a courgette dish earlier on.
I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to food, and classic, Italian food really is for me is the greatest cuisine. And there's a great restaurant just outside Naples where they do this dish where they cook the kind of older zucchini, the sort of big courgettes, and they cook them really, really slowly with lots of garlic and basil, and they cook it really slowly so it almost becomes slightly caramelized, almost slightly brown in color. And then they cook spaghetti or a little short penne, and they cook some sweet onions. And then right at the very end, they mix the sweet onions with the courgettes, and then whisk up an egg yolk with Parmesan cheese and some of the cooking water. And then you get this incredible emulsified dish, which is absolutely delicious. But, you could do that without the cheese, it'd be absolutely fine. But the main process is the courgettes, which are cooked for a long time. And cooking vegetables for a long time really makes a difference. And if you look at Italian food, there's so many ingredients that they use that they cook for a long, long time to get the maximum flavor out. Mm-hmm. So it's a brilliant cuisine to discover vegetarian food.
You were talking about Parmesan there. Neil, we were talking a little bit earlier on about Parmesan being the Italian MSG almost.
Is MSG? Tomatoes, mushrooms, Parmesan, the big thing about them, why we like them is tending to be the MSG. And I think MSG is one of these ignored things, and you can get it we use it. I use it quite a lot in my home cooking. I don't use it in the restaurant very, very much. But I love it at home. I add it to stuff, and I think I cook vegetarian at home. I cook almost a vegan diet at home. I don't buy meat. I cook with it so much at work. I just don't fancy it when I go home. So I use that. I use a lot of Asian recipes. I look to sort of Asian dishes much more than I look to European dishes for vegan stuff, because these cultures have been cooking it for a long time. Look at Indian cuisine with vegetarianism. It's so much better. And there's so much more substance to it, and that's what I do at home more than anything, I think.
And do you do cooking do you cook many vegetables in temper?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we use like anybody, we use Natura supply, and we use all the seasonal ingredients. We get excited about that and fish and everything as we do about the meat. It's just that the meat's what we're known for, and I think that the movement in restaurants, if you track it in the last 5-10 years, a lot of the high-end stuff, look at the dairy, look at people are moving towards vegetables anyway, you know, because meat's too expensive, it's inaccessible, you know, it's harder to cook, the GPs are wrong when you're using it, and you know, the quality of vegetables that we get here from Europe is spectacular. So it's much more exciting for chefs to use that. So that's kind of happening anyway, and I think that's kind of getting ignored in the whole passing. I think, you know, if you look at high-end cuisine, it's becoming more vegetarian-based anyway. Yeah.
And do you cook? You're famous for being fish, but you obviously have to cater for vegetarians on your menu. Have you got any specific dishes that you are cooking at the moment that you think people enjoy hearing about?
Yeah, there's one sort of mainly sort of vegetable focused one, but obviously us being us, we put a bit of fish with it. So, but no, it's the ones we've got on at the minute is carrots, but we just try and use whatever. It's the same ethos with the vegetables as with the fish. So we talk to the suppliers. We have these relationships that we built up over time, and we just ask them to sort of create the menu for us, if you like. So they send us stuff. So at the minute we're getting beautiful carrots, and we cook them down with lots of butter, sugar, vinegar, whatever.
Surely that's the secret of all good cooking.
Yeah, I think do a lot of. That's how I got this finely tuned athletic physique. But no. And then, we just grill them up and we serve them with some cod's roe and some pistachios. But we've done it through the year with various things. I mean, with beautiful asparagus when that was in, and cabbages in the summer, and celeriacs and things. And I think with all cooking, I just think it is that adaptability, as Theo was saying, and Neil, about getting those ingredients and just letting them speak for themselves. Do you know what I mean? And just realising that to an extent we're just the facilitators. We're the middlemen between the customers and the producers. We're probably the least important people in that triangle. Really, is we just have to take what's great and get it to them.
It's interesting. We had heard a little bit about that, about our theming about chefs. Celebrity chefs are on the wane, and chefs like you who are just looking at creating great food are becoming much more apparent.
I don't think vegetables are sexy yet, and I think that's the issue. I think focusing on vegetables as a replacement for meat is never kind of going to work for me. You know, can't take good Italian. It's the same thing to you guys earlier. It was like we give one of your customers a really good salami, and then you give them a vegan one. It ain't going to work. You know, that comparison is always going to be really bad. Whereas you take something which, you know, like Vietnamese cuisine, where the meat is not the flavor provider, it's not providing the big bold flavors of it, and the replacement of vegetables within that cuisine is really easy. And I think rather than looking at and how do you make vegan food celebratory, because it's not at the moment, you know, it's not something, oh, Christmas, oh, brilliant, you know, they get families together, you know, let's cook some couscous. Oh, really? You know, it's never got that thing. So we've got to find a way to harness it and actually to look at vegetarian cooking without categorizing it as a replacement. We've got to find its own cuisine and actually follow it. And I think chefs and us and people like us in the industry are the people to do that, rather than, if I'm going to say so, the sort of activist vegans, because we're the people making that food, you know, that's really nice. So I think it's about us, you know, continuing that and developing it and working with vegetables, which I think is happening anyway. It's just going to take time.
It's interesting you talk about, you know, taking things from other cuisines when you're talking about vegetarian cooking and moving away from vegetarian cooking and looking at the cuisine types. There's certainly you, Neil, and Tom, you have got a much more flexible approach to different cuisines, and Theo, you're very much an Italian-based based chef, but looking at that fluidity, and we'll come back to you about Italian cooking, how do you get inspired about the influences? How do you get inspired for influences your new dishes and your new exciting dishes about cuisine?
The thing with me that always inspires me is, again, it's the produce, but I think with other cuisines, I always find it difficult. I'm a real stickler for something being authentic. So someone like Theo can go and do Italian because they know it so well. For me, if I try to cook in an Italian way, I just don't feel like it would feel real or authentic, and it would just be sort of a bastardization. So what I like to do is take flavors and cooking techniques and apply them to ingredients that I know I love and ways that I like to do. There's shades of I think Spanish is probably the one that comes across the most in ours, other than British, of course. Yep. But I think Spanish, because it's a cuisine that I love to eat, and the flavors are very sort of accessible to the way we cook. But then Asian as well, I would say, we do a lot of cured and raw fish. And that kind of work, Asian flavors lend themselves very well to that. But then saying that, we've got a raw brill dish on at the minute with, we call it green sauce, but salsa verde, just a really, really classic salsa verde, and that's it. So I think for me, I would never like to sort of pigeonhole what we do and say this is our take on a Spanish dish or an Asian dish, but just to be inspired by those flavors and just, like you say, just approach it, just sort of attach it to the produce. Theo was talking earlier about the produce you get in Bangkok and attaching that to the Italian one. I think that's the way to do it. It's that adaptability, and just think, well, what would be delicious with this? Is it, and it might be something that's quite classically French or something that's sort of Spanishy or very, very British. And I think that's what we tend to do, is just cook the way we know how to cook and the way we like, rather than saying, oh, well, everyone's got Vietnamese on now, so let's do a Vietnamese dish. Like, that doesn't really work to our approach. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Theo was talking about some of the ingredients that he's found in his restaurants in Bangkok and in Hong Kong, and interestingly how the ingredients in the UK affect how you cook your Italian-based cuisine.
So I'm not Italian, by the way. I have I love Italian food. I have Italian soul, I would say. But the thing about Italian food is it's all about the produce. And before I opened a restaurant in Bangkok, I went out there, and to have a look at what produce I could find. And when you open your eyes, you actually find some amazing things. I found this Italian guy living in Bangkok making burrata. So I sort of got connected with him, and I got burrata, and then we got fantastic produce like pork. So it's not a fusion. We're just getting the best produce from Bangkok or from Thailand and putting it on the menu. So we've got amazing pork, we've got some incredible fish, there's barramundi, these sort of fish that you wouldn't necessarily associate in Italian, but it's what's available. And I think it's very easy to open a restaurant on the other side of the world and say, well, I'm just going to buy everything from France or from Italy or from Spain. And what you're doing there is really compromising. So it's about finding the ingredients and then writing the menu, and that's how we see it. And then using that Italian kitchen, we spend, each restaurant, we spend about 8 hours a day making fresh pasta. We have exactly the same recipe, So it's all about the work and the care that's taken to it. But it's all about the produce, really.
And you said you took a trip to Chiang Mai, was it that?
Chiang Mai, to go and see all the vegetables. There's an amazing, array of organic vegetables growing there. And so again, rather than, getting lots of things in, which is obviously incredibly expensive as well, looking at the local produce and seeing what you can get, and asking people to grow. And I took some seeds out. I took some chima de rape seeds, which are the top turnip tops. They thought I was crazy, but actually, when they started to grow, they realized the flavor was so good. And so on the menu we've got orecchietti with cima di rape, which is turnip tops, the pasta. And going back to the sort of the vegan vegetarian thing, I mean, there's a dish you get from Puglia, and it is just this pasta with the turnip tops, with chili, garlic, and a little bit of anchovy. I'm talking about one fillet of anchovy for about 3 portions. Makes all the difference. But by having that little bit of fish, really creates a great flavor, and it becomes a seasoning. I think, we think about with food, little things like that make a massive difference.
Sure, there's some glutamate in there somewhere. And then another point that you were talking about with some of the British ingredients are now becoming so good that you don't have to now buy buy Italian or bring in Italian?
Well, I mean, obviously with Italian food, you have to have some Italian ingredients, but it's actually getting people to grow things for you. And we have a pretty good climate in this country, and getting people to grow, particularly things like greens. They can get the most incredible brassicas, like Swiss chard and beetroots and all those kind of things, which are absolutely brilliant here. And before, 15 years ago, we'd be getting them from Covent Garden Market in these little boxes, and they'd be perfectly labelled, and they'd cost £10 for a box of 6 turnips. Why not get the bigger ones that are a bit knobblier and got much more flavour with the leaves on, and pay £2.50 for them? You just have to look at things in a different way, and use particularly vegetables in a different way, and not worry about them being perfectly shaped, and think about their flavour more than anything.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing this idea of almost transparency in your sourcing, and the absolute key part of what you're trying to do is source the best ingredients. And Neil, I know you get some amazing meat from one of your suppliers. Is it the Wild Meat Company?
No, we don't use. No, I mean we use farms.
Beg your pardon. We use rare occasionally for a few bits and bobs. So you've developed a relationship now with a farm?
Individual farms, but I've been doing it since PICU. So when we had PICU, I knew a lot of farmers in Cornwall, and then we knew a lot of salad growers. So Sean, that now supplies a lot of Natura stuff, we first introduced him to Natura, and all the farmers around there. So it was a big support for Cornwall. So we knew these guys. And then when I opened up Smokehouse, I decided to do the whole animal thing. So we had to find people that could actually deliver a cow, which before was really difficult, whereas now it's really easy, because I pay a farmer. My biggest thing is about farmers and how much they earn, and how much they get screwed over by most of the meat industry. So we'll pay like £2 a kilo more than most of the other people buying it, but we can still make a profit of that because there's no in between. So these guys, and also the fishing industry, have cottoned onto that massively. We started getting in fish direct from the boats when I was doing John Salt years ago, and now that's kind of common. We weren't the first to do it, but now it's commonplace, and you can tweet the guys on the boat, and they'll be like, well, I've got this for you, and they'll take a picture of it, and you see it on social media, and you're like, yeah, that's fine. They come in. Wild Harbour have their own boats, and they'll take the photograph and stuff. Same with the cows. We know the history of the cow. We know what was fed on. We know its mother. We know its father. We know that, and we know what we're getting is the real thing, and we also get a better product from it. But we've just got to find a way, and I've just got to find a way to use the entirety of a cow, which is hard. That's taken a lot of people think are trying to do it, and that's why nobody's quite copied it yet. There's a few people that say they do it, but you look at the menu, you go, you don't. No, you don't.
Well, because they've got too many steaks on it, or whatever it was.
So difficult because you take the middle sirloin bit and the nice bit and the fillets, and you take all that off, and you're just like, shit, my fridge is still full, and I don't know what this is, and it's massive, and there's loads of fat, and there's so much fat in these animals. And that's most of it. So we use beef fat tacos. So we ended up doing a dish with it, which is now the most popular dish.
So do you make?
We make the breads with the beef fat.
Is that the
we've just switched our mash to this beef fat mash. So we use beef fat instead of butter. Which the good thing is, beef fat is delicious, and the cows we buy are amazing. So the beef fat is extra delicious on it. We do braised dishes, we do burgers, we have to do because we have to mince beef, we do minced skewers, we do this. So it's about balancing it up. And now we do 1.5 cows a week at Soho for, that's 3,000 people a week we're serving. So that's Hawksmoor style of restaurant. And they'll use in their meat production, I would guess probably about 100 to 200 cattle to do what they do. Because they'll just use the sirloins, just use this bit. Which is only 3 or 4 kilos in an animal.
That's incredible. I do remember when I once got a cow, the guy said, what do you want? And I said, the sirloin, the fillet, the shin. And he said, well, what do you want to do with the other 300 kilos? And I'm like, all right.
The big bit. Big messy bit.
You do sausages, yeah.
But the difference is actually our chefs love doing it. So our chefs, we have a group of chefs that have stayed there since the beginning, and they love doing it. And they love coming up with new things. And it's almost like you just give them a knife and you just cut this up, do whatever you want with it.
Have you investigated anything of the micro cuts and the seaming out of different cuts of
Nah,
beef?
we just hack it.
You go for it.
No, can't do that. They're too rushed to do it. The good thing is, because we use different cooking techniques, we use the barbecue technique, you can just, if it's hot, braise it, if it's you can chop it up smaller, and it's just about those guys learning to deal with it, but yet not throwing anything away, and getting the most out of every little bit. The good thing is, if you buy a cattle that's fed, you had the people talking about, the American cattle getting fed on grain and stuff like that. That doesn't happen here. It kind of annoys me when that whole thing gets looped into this, like, we're in this curve of deforestation because of our growing cattle. We don't have that. These cows are fed on beautiful grass and they taste amazing. So no matter what you do with them, they still taste good. You just got to, make sure you don't overcook it or burn it.
So you talked about, and I hate to use the word sort of waste or byproduct, because I remember when we were cooking, everything had a purpose, and especially in a fish restaurant, you'll have bones, carcass. Do you have any dishes or any things that you use?
Yeah, no, we do. Fish is such an expensive commodity that you really do need to utilise it. So I mean, the obvious ones is bones for stock. We've always got those, but then we when I think about sort of waste and things like that with fish, one thing that gets overlooked is sort of like bycatch. So quite often you go to a fish restaurant, you see turbot, cod, lobsters, things like that. People forget about things like gurnard, dabs, those sorts of. Do you know what I mean? These lesser grey mullet. We've just bought some beautiful grey mullet today, but these are fish that aren't always known about as such or at the forefront. But for me, I personally am very much moving towards using those lesser known species, and there's a few reasons. Number one, they're really cheap, and I got bills, so that's one. Number two is that they're always a little bit more readily available. You find they're a lot easier to get hold of on the market. And number three is that ethicalness, it's the sustainability, it's using those things that don't always get used. We're in a fortunate position though, because of the pedigree I have obviously from working with Nathan, is that we understand those products. A lot of them, the thing that people shy away from them is ignorance. They think chefs haven't used them before, or they're worried that customers won't buy them. We're at a place where people will buy it because they know we're a fish restaurant and we know what we're doing. And I think once customers trust you with those things, they can see that it's delicious. Other things that we do, I mean, a couple of examples. Cod roe is one. I know cod roe is quite a fashionable one now, but cod roe was something that didn't really get used outside of sort of Terra Masalata for a long time. So we use that. We had a beautiful.
So how do you use that? Do you use it as a main centre dish? Or do you dry it and grate it?
No, we do it with the carrots actually. So those carrots that I spoke about earlier. Cod roe is really it's full of umami. It's very sort of rich, and it can have. I mean, any fish product that has an excessive amount of blood, so like the roe can be quite bloody, and fish liver as well can be quite bloody, so they have a bitterness. So the fact that the carrots are nice and sweet, it kind of counteracts with it, and it's a perfect little marriage. Talking about fish liver, we made a monkfish liver parfait, which was brilliant. It was literally it was Marco Pierre White's chicken liver recipe, and we just soaked some monkfish liver in milk, and just did it with that, and it was amazing. It was one of my favourite dishes that we've done. And what I really liked about it was that we didn't have to pay for the monkfish liver, because it was it comes in. But it is a waste product. It is the other day we had it's not a product that we normally order, but we had some really good turbot come in. And I was prepping it, and I was just looking at this turbot's head, and I was thinking, there's so much meat on this. Yeah, there's so much meat on this, and it's so beautiful. I just thought, it seems like such a waste to get rid of it. And I was lucky enough last year to do some of the Wasted series with Dan Barber over at Selfridges. So interesting, incredibly interesting. And they did a cod head. And it's something that they've done in Spain a lot. Is the hake throats. They use these things, and I just thought this is such a waste. And we did it, and we roasted it with lots of brown butter and lemon and caper. We did the grenadillas, like the classic French garnish, and it really was beautiful. And I mean, in all honesty, it was a lot more interesting to eat than a piece of like a fillet of turbot. I mean, it really was something quite sort of special, and it was nice. I watched the family that ordered it, and they're picking the bones, and they're all talking, and I just thought, well, where's the difference? Why is it that this piece of turbot is nicer than this piece of turbot? And it's just because one of them's not smiling back at them, the other one.
Yeah.
So, but no, it's an exciting way to cook as well. It's exciting to think, well, what can we do with this? How can we use this up? And what can we do to make it special?
Because a lot of the audience will be working with, waste product that will be coming in and trying to make it into something delicious and exciting. Something I really enjoyed about chatting to you about your menus is the way you do your garnishes.
Yeah.
How you flex your garnishes depending on, it doesn't necessarily have to be one type of fish.
No, exactly, and that's something that we learned with Nathan, because obviously with fish it's such a weather-dependent natural product. I mean, everything is wild. We don't have the luxury of being able to go to farms and you know that you're more or less going to be able to get, okay, there are things that come into it, but more often than not, you may not, one day there might be a load of turbot and the next day there's none, or the weather's bad so the price goes up. So we've always had to be adaptable. So what we do is sort of have like an index of what things work with what. So for example, talking about the raw fish dish, we do it with brill, but tomorrow it's going to be with grey mullet, and we've done it with bream, we've done it with mackerel, we've done it with various different fish, bass obviously, and for us, it works really well because, number one, the suppliers love us because we can take pretty much anything off their hands. So that builds our relationship with them. But number two, we never have to pay over the odds. I mean, there's a lot of places that will have a sea bass dish, say, and one day your sea bass might be £15 a kilo, the next day it's £25 a kilo. But because you've got this sea bass dish on, you have to do it. Now, I know as well as anyone that a piece of grey mullet or a piece of black bream or John Dory will work just as nicely with that, and you'll probably pay a damn sight less than having to get these beautiful 2 to 3 kilo bass, and they all have to be the same because, if you cut something this square instead of this square, that someone's, but like it doesn't matter. It's like you're saying about the vegetables. It doesn't matter. Like what matters is what tastes better. So we might change the menu 5 times a day. Like genuinely, we'll start the day. I got a bit of a bollocking about how much paper we're using the other day because I was just like, but no, we're doing it like this, and we might buy 1 hake and 3 pollock, and then we'll change it through service. But whatever we put down is the best thing that we could possibly buy. It's the best thing for the best price. So it makes sense, right? Like that does it's logical to me to do it that way.
It's almost educating the consumer about what is good.
Yeah,
it's great. I mean, you had an interesting dish on that made maybe grouse more accessible.
I'm just going back to the fish. It's quite interesting how people change names of fishes. Like Mark Hicks called a grey mullet a silver mullet.
Yeah.
He said it's sold out immediately.
Yeah.
You try and sell a grey mullet in a restaurant, it's quite difficult. And someone said, like barramundi, you call it Australian sea bass, and it will sell out.
Yeah.
It's just that terms. I think it's very important. But we Italian kitchen's a very frugal kitchen, and so you use as much as you possibly can. So we had some grouse, and we get a kind of mixed box of grouse, and some have got really lots of shot, and some are too old. And in August, September, grouse are really at their prime, I think, and they're nice and young and tender. But you get a few big tough old ones. So we slow cook them down. I mean, same sort of idea. You use other methods that we'd use for our stuffed pasta, like our cappelletti. So you use a sort of a mirepoix of celery, carrot, onions, a bit of pancetta, and then get the grouse whole and seal them all off and cook them in the oven very, very slowly for about 2 or 3 hours with loads of red wine. And then let it cool down, take the fat off, the skin off, and then break all the meat up, and then chop all those vegetables. Mix a little bit of parmesan in there. And we did, we had a ravioli on in September, which was a ravioli with grouse, and it was just all those lovely grouse flesh with this. We use an 18 egg yolk per kilo pasta dough, so it's a very rich pasta dough. And then we just got some new seasoned, just come in, fresh chestnuts. And we just crushed the chestnuts in a pestle and mortar, and then sort of cooked that in a little bit of butter, and then just tossed this ravioli with some of the roasting juices of the grouse. And it's an acquired taste, but what was nice is that people that wouldn't necessarily order a grouse had the pasta and said, "Oh wow, I liked that. It was an introduction to grouse, and it was kind of a little bit more subtle version rather than having a really rare, strong grouse that can be quite overpowering.
Quite high and quite hard going, yeah. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. A lot of your cooking, certainly you do, is driven by nostalgia, and some of the influences that I've seen on your menus is nostalgic, but a lot of what we're wanting to talk about today is about trends moving forward and moving forward in food. Is there any ingredients or any techniques or any things that you think will drive cooking in the future, or that you're seeing in Italian cuisine, say in London?
Well, I think Italian cuisine has come, Italian cuisine is in front of us everywhere. You go into a supermarket now and you can buy 3 different types of Parmesan. You can buy burrata, you can buy buffalo mozzarella. 15 years ago, you would never see that. You'd try and find hard to find that, some like Lena stores in Soho. But so it's very exciting how it's come. But I think it's come so far now. We're looking at regionality. We're looking at regions. Italy has got so many different regions, and each region is specific, has specific dishes. So I think we're becoming far more educated on Italian food, and therefore restaurants are having to be even more inventive and be more creative and try and get the most amazing ingredients. You were talking about Natura earlier on. Natura bring over incredible stuff that you'd never normally you'd find before. But my theory on food trends and going forward is I think we're kind of going sort of back to basics, going back to classics and cooking things in the traditional way, cooking fish on the bone, cooking meat on the bone. I had a chef in the other day who trialed for a job as a chef de partie, worked in an amazing list of restaurants, all sort of Michelin star restaurants. I gave him a 3-kilo sea bass and I said, scale that, gut it and fillet it. And he looked at me like, I've never done that before. He had been cooking for 6 years, and I think it's all about educating people, young people, giving people a chance. We take on 3 students from Westminster College every year, and we push them through and we promote within, and that's how you get great staff, and that's how the future of food is. It's all about the younger generations coming through, and and learning from their seniors.
You mentioned a few places of regional Italian cooking. Is there any couple of examples that you are excited about at the moment?
Well, I love Puglia. I think Puglia is a great region for food. If you ever think of going on holiday, go to Puglia. It's the most brilliant place. You've got amazing seafood and fish on the coast, and then you go in 10 miles in, and all you'll see is rabbit and vegetables. And it's cucina povera. It's quite poor cooking. But you're talking about vegan. There's a dish they do which is called fava cicoria, which is dried broad beans, which they dry them all off, and then they take the skins off, and then they boil them in water. And then they mash them like mashed potato and add loads and loads of olive oil, because olives are everywhere in that region. And then they get cicoria, which is bitter, very bitter. And they blanch it for about 10-15 minutes. And then in the oil, they add chilies and garlic. And then you get this plate of food, which is just this puree of the chickpea, of the broad bean, the cicoria, and then the garlic and the chilies. It's absolutely amazing. And I think our palates are changing. I think we're becoming far more interested in slightly bitter things. If you look at everyone loves Aperol Spritz now. That's the kind of latest thing. And the Italians have been doing that for years. They start off with an aperitivo, which could be at a Campari or an Aperol, and they start bitter and then go sweet. And I think that's an interesting way of the palate in this country has changed. But Puglia is definitely a great place to go.
Puglia.
Yeah.
So that's the bit at the bottom.
It's the heel.
It's the heel. Yeah. And Neil, the same question to you about new ingredients, new trends, where you think future food is going, certainly with fire, perhaps.
I said this at an event recently. I think it's called. I call it the delification of the food scene, and especially in London now. And I think there's a side to simplicity which we're moving towards, which Italians have always done really bloody well. And there's a move towards the Italian cuisine, but there's also a move towards this kind of like vegetable in a plate idea where, you go into a restaurant, you get a tomato and it's got a bit of olive oil and that's it. And that's great, but the reasons behind that, I think, are just lack of chefs, lack of, the rents are too big, people are getting a little bit less daring. I just worry the future of that in 5 or 6 years' time when that fades into, because at the moment it's being held by guys like in Brat, who are great cooks. When that fades down and becomes a thing that lesser chefs take care of, that it's just going to become, you know, you're going to find an industry that just can't cook anymore, and, you know, chefs that don't have the skills that, you know, that I learned and you learned and you learned. That's a sort of worrying trend. I think it comes from the lack of chefs at the moment. It comes from the rents being really high, and it comes from, you know, the sort of lot of focus on some of this cuisine, which post-Brexit might be so bloody expensive. We're going to have to look at another way of doing it. You know,
is there anything?
That's the main cooking scene that I see. I mean, there's lots of stuff coming in. Obviously, like London's very multicultural, so you've got, you know, great Thai food coming out at the moment, like brilliant Thai food. You know, you've got sort of like Burmese food, which is coming onto the horizon, which is brilliant, and that's all really, really exciting. So you've got that, and then you've got this, and there's some guys doing it brilliantly, like Bright and Brat and all these sort of guys. But then I just wonder if that's the future. And that future, unless it's well maintained and really well looked after, is a little bit bleak to me.
So that kind of restraint, I mean, that restrained cooking with very sort of simple.
Well, I go to Spain a lot, and I eat a lot in Spain. So I go to San Sebastian, and you get a plate of mushrooms with an egg yolk, and it's the best bloody thing ever. But that's a bar, you know, and the reason they do that is because they grow them locally. And that's what we do, and that's kind of the tradition. And you're there, you have a drink, and you do this, and I love that, and I love eating like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean a cuisine in this country should be based on that. I think creativity needs to happen. I think people need to learn skills. I think you know, you need to learn how to make the pasta. You need to learn how to do the things. You need to learn how to cook properly, rather than just what I call delification, which is doing something that you can do in a deli. Because, you know, we can all buy from Natura. We can all buy. It started off with, you know, they started off, correct me if I'm wrong, because you'll know, but they supplied the River Cafe initially, and they were going across to Italy and France and buying all the nice ingredients and bring it back. And that was a really special thing back then. Now, the Thai restaurants have got them. I've got them. You know, they're on the high street and the thing, so everybody knows about that ingredient, and you can eat like that at home. You know, I mean, if you want to eat like that at home, you just go to Natura. You can order it online and chop up a tomato and stick a nice olive oil on it. It's great. You know, it's delicious. But is that the future of cuisine? It worries me. And it's good that guys like Brat and, you know, guys like Tom, they're actually coming with really creative, interesting cuisines through that. But I just worry it's veering a bit far towards that.
Too simple.
Bit dull.
I think too simple might be the wrong way to view it. I completely agree with you, and I think the way that I go to some places and you see that style of cooking, and what is lacking is the reverence and the understanding and the reason why you just put that tomato with that olive oil. There's a reason behind it. It's not just because, oh well, such and such restaurant is doing it. It's because you understand where that thing has come from, and you understand the reverence for it, and what makes it so special, and what and like have that sort of understanding of something, and why it's so beautiful, and why it should be treated simply. Simple cooking often gets confused now with lazy cooking, and you do see things sometimes, and you're like, everyone's posting things all over Instagram and like, oh my God, I've just had this, and look how simple and amazing it is. Yeah, all right, it's simple, yeah, but it's not what it's about. There's, you know, like you said, Italians been doing it for years, and they know
I've
inside
seen his
out.
kitchen and his kitchen. They're not lazy. I've eaten both. The chefs are sweating, but you go into some restaurants now, and they're like, you know, if you look at a kitchen and it's an open kitchen, and the guy's there and he's drinking a cup of tea out of a mug, and he's doing a service with 60 covers, I'm looking at going, what? He just, you know, do you need to be there? You know, it's just like, whoa.
Very true, very true. I think we're going to take some questions from the audience when we go on. But just while we find someone, is there one of your top 3 places to eat in London at the moment?
Sabor for me is better in London.
Neil?
I'm going to say the same thing.
Oh, well, Sabor you can say.
Bright, actually Bright, and Bright can be accused of going down the level I'm down, but actually do it brilliantly. And if that's the future, that's fine.
My favourite is Clipstone.
Sabor, and
Bright.
Right, there we go.
So,
Have we got any questions from the
questions from the audience? I'm certainly getting very hungry, but
Got someone all the way back there. But
thanks, Scott.
What was your favourite dish at Sabor? What was the thing that
All of it.
The scallop ceviche was amazing.
scallop ceviche?
Yeah.
How did they make that? What was with that?
Sorry?
What was with that?
Oh, it was a really classic one. There was just loads and loads of vegetables in it. It was amazing. Oh no, and there was this one. It was mussels with, I forget what the sauce is called now, but it's like a tomato, sherry vinegar and garlic sauce, and it was just. I took my head chef Christian for his birthday just before we opened, and I just remember it was one of their meals, and I just sat there and just everything was not only delicious but like inspiring, and you sit there and it's like wizardry. Like you don't know how to do it. Like I couldn't go and get them ingredients and make it as authentically beautiful as that, and it takes you away from that restaurant. It's like it's more profound than just eating a nice bit of food. It takes you away from that.
I think as a chef, you want to come
sure
out feeling a little bit shit.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a few development chefs here might be thinking the same there. You know.
It's a question to Neil. Why did you decide at the Covent Garden restaurant to do the Detroit pizzas when everyone else is doing the more Italian-style bases?
The Detroit pizza thing. I ate them when I was in Brooklyn, and they were delicious. And my cooking is not simple. I try and do it sometimes. I try and put a dish on, it's simple. People go, that's shit. Because my customers expect a certain thing, and when they come in, you know, I've done Ortiz anchovies and a little bit of, you know, sourdough bread and things like that. I've done all that stuff, and nobody buys it in my place. They buy the dirty stuff, you know. So, and when I ate in this place called Pizza Emily in Brooklyn, I was like, shit. I was like, it's like, we haven't done deep pan pizzas in a long time, and in London and the rest of the country, like you can't move from Neapolitan pizzas, and they've done them, and they're great, and everybody's smashing it. And I lived in Streatham before, and I had three Neapolitan places that were banging there. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do to this? Am I going to make this better? I'm like, no, you know, I'm just going to do it, and that's there. So when I came across this pizza, it's like, this is something I have a bit of fun with, because nobody's going to have a go at me for doing something silly with this. And sticking lots of meat and sticking lots of things in it. And that kind of happened. And I mean, it's still a popular, you know, we've got a margarita on the menu with really great tomatoes and really great mozzarella and really great everything. People buy the cheeseburger one. People buy the Japanese one with all the katsuobushi on it. And that I think for me is a bit more fun, because it allows my chefs to have a little bit more fun with it. I like my chefs working. I like to give them new ideas and new directions, and them to, you know, we have, for one pizza, we've got a recipe list that's about 6 pages long, and it takes them 2 days to make it, and then we sell it for £7, and nobody will get that, and nobody will care, and nobody will ever, and it's not, you know, we're not trying to get a Michelin star, we're not trying to get any accolades, or it's just that we like to put effort and put stuff into it, which I think with Neapolitan, it's basically technique and produce, and if you've got the right technique and the right produce, everybody's making kind of the same pizza. Which is not a bad thing if you're eating, but as a chef, it gets a bit dull.
Fair enough. Have we got any more questions for our chefs? We've got one up the front here. Certainly, when I ate your Detroit
Also,
pizza,
the Detroit pizza was
feel-
banging. So that was the reason we did.
felt dirty after eating your pizza. It was delicious.
It took about 6 weeks for us to get it right, though. The ones we did at the beginning were absolutely terrible, and I really feel bad for all the critics. Pizza guys came in and tasted them. I was like, oh no, this still isn't right. And it's like making focaccia, it's like making lemon focaccia, but you have to serve it at service, so it has to be at the right level, and then you bake it at that time, and then it holds, and it's there. And that's really difficult. So it took our guys like a long time to get it right. But we're open to hundreds and hundreds of customers coming in every day and fucking it up. So it's quite, you know, that's the challenge that you get. But once you get it right, like anything in cooking, that's when you get uplifted. You go, brilliant, I've got it.
Hi.
Sorry.
It's okay. This might be a bit controversial, but would you ever consider cooking with lab-grown meat, which we've heard a lot about today?
What was that?
So we didn't catch
Oh, sorry. Would you consider cooking with lab-grown meat?
lab-grown meat. Would you consider cooking lab-grown meat?
I'm not against the process of it, and I think it's going to be important in the future to feed people and hungry people and whatever, and to provide protein and things. I'm vehemently against the idea of making food more less about fresh food and more about what's the word for it? Processed food. To making food more processed to feed people. And I think processing industry and bringing industry into it is the wrong way to go. I think at the moment the bad thing about the meat industry is the industrial part of it. It's not the guy with the farm that I'm dealing with. It's the Americans trying to feed. It's trying to feed people something where you can't grow it. That's the worst thing we do in the food industry. You know, you can't grow cows in Texas because there's no bloody grass, but yet it's the biggest place in the world for having cows. That's the problem. You know, not everybody should be able to have cows. Not everybody should have meat. Meat should be more expensive, yes. Meat should be a luxury, yes. We shouldn't just be able to get a chicken at £2 in the supermarket, yes. And I think the lab thing, it's like, why? You know, we just need to eat less meat, and we need to make vegetables better, and we need to cook them better, and people need to learn to cook them better. Because I've got loads of vegan friends, and they're crap at cooking vegetables. And that really annoys me because that's all they're doing. And I'm like, why aren't you better at this? You know, why can't you cook a mushroom properly? Why can't you cut this open and give it a nice grill and cook it like medium rare inside and it tastes amazing? You know, they overcook it and they just get this mush and you're like, Christ, you know, this is your life. And I think it's just more about looking at vegetables, and because vegetables are bloody great. And a crap vegetable is better than crap meat, 100 times over. You know, a crap aubergine that's been farmed and overproduced is much better than a crap cow that has been factory farmed and fed full of shit. You know, I'd much rather eat that. So it's just about respecting the vegetable and going forward rather than making a replacement for something that you don't really need to replace. And that's I think where you need to look to the countries that don't use a lot of meat and don't have a lot of meat and use vegetables in the cooking. India is like a prime example for me because when I go there and eat Indian vegetarian food, it's fucking good and you don't miss it, and you shouldn't miss it. But you shouldn't try and replace meat, and you shouldn't put more food processing into the bargain because that's just going to create worse. I don't know what's going to happen, but that's just going to make it worse and worse and worse. Over-processing anything, industrializing anything is wrong. You know, we need proper farmers to grow things and to appreciate good vegetables and good meat and good everything.
I've got a question. There's been quite a lot of talk today about people, yeah, and you guys have talked about the challenge in the industries of skills and knowledge and understanding and things. And there's no quick answer, but I'm really interested in what you think we should do as a country to try and change that.
Personally, I think it's the stigma behind the industry in general. I think if you go to other places in Europe and you look at how a restaurant manager is considered in society, it's the same as a bank manager, it's the same as a doctor, it's the same as a lawyer, and there's no reason that they shouldn't be. And I think how many British people do you know that are top restaurant managers in London? It's very few, considering the amount of restaurants. And how many British people are front of house in restaurants in Britain? Very few, I would say, in London particularly. And I don't see there anything wrong with multiculturalism at all. I think it's certainly something that should be revered. However, I do think there's a reason that people from Europe are doing it, and I think it's because of the way it's viewed in society. I think it's a little bit old-fashioned now to say about these hard kitchens and these Gordon Ramsay style kitchens. I think that is very much a thing of the past. Yeah. But I do feel that this industry has a stigma of low pay and long hours, and that's really not the case anymore. I don't think. Certainly
can't do it. No, can't do it.
No,
you can't get enough people, and it just doesn't. But that message never gets processed, and I think people still, as you say, people still think it's a servitude thing, and they don't like it, and that's the thing. And it's brought on a lot by this attitude of you have to do what I say and the customer is always right. The customer is not always right. That was invented by the guy that started Selfridges, wasn't it? That was his phrase. Yeah. That was said in the same time as women should always stay in the kitchen and the kids should be seen and not heard and all that sort of stuff. That phrase is the only one that keeps going. The rest of them are going, yeah, that's bullshit, that's it. But this one, people still quote it to me. They go, customer's always right. I'm like, you're not. You know, it's the most insane thing to say. So you're right. So if you're a bit racist, you're right. If you're rude to my waiter, you're right. If you think you paid but you haven't, you're right. You know, you're not. You know, it's all about mutual respect. And I think that attitude towards the restaurant industry has to change, and people have to understand that it's a respectful job. And serving people and being good at your job is a good thing to do, and it's worthy, and you feel great at it.
Yeah, and I totally agree, and it's really interesting because even when I was cooking 20, 30 years ago, that was very much the case, and it's still the case today, yeah. And yet we've got this, and yet we've got this massive food culture in this industry, and everybody sort of wants to be a chef, but actually nobody wants to be a chef. Nobody wants to serve at table. And how do we change that? Is that in the schools? Or how do we change the
The media representation is wrong of what the industry is. The sort of master chef and things like that. And I think you can be a chef in this time and you can do this thing. It takes a lot of fucking work, and it takes a lot of work to run a front of house. I have the utmost respect for our front of house in Temper. I mean, it is an absolute nightmare place to work. And we're going into the Christmas season, and I just don't go into the restaurant for a while because I see what they're doing, and I'm like, oh my God, how are they doing it? Are they going to quit? Are they going to lose? Because it is tough. It is tough. And that is a hard job to do. And the people that put that down, and a lot of people put that down as, oh, it's just a part-time job, and oh, it's just this. We have to get over that, because the restaurant industry is massive, and restaurants make a lot of money, and you can make a lot of money at it. And we just need to put the power back into, the people running these things, and give it a little bit of gravitas, and give it a job title, and make people feel proud to work in the industry.
On that note, the power to the people.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, we're keeping these people from their gin and tonics. I think Charles is going to do a few closing remarks, but I'd just like to thank our three chefs for some really great insights and for their time today.